My wife and I have outgrown our friends, both from a financial perspective as well as ambition. How do we attract like-minded folks, especially in a post-COVID world?
This is the dark night of the soul for success. One of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is the unintended consequences of growing. This happens as a couple, and this happens in your social networks. But if your social network isn't growing and you will outgrow that network, right? And so very often that means you find less and less in common with your friends. And this can be frustrating, and you can feel misunderstood, and your friends may feel misunderstood or frustrated with you, in that you may start to behave in a way that makes them feel like you are suddenly this elitist, pompous, arrogant person, or like you think you're better than them. Now, assuming that isn't actually what's going on, which in some cases it is, it's because you have less and less in common with them because your values, your focus, and your vision is somewhere else. This is very normal. It's one of the costs of seeking to become more than what you currently are. We generally, through kind of a natural state of homeostasis, find like-minded people. Remember, we don't get what we want, we get what we are. So we attract what we're energetically aligned with. And so if you suddenly start to elevate what you are aligned with, if the people around you aren't growing and changing, inevitably there will be a moment of tension where you either decide to fall back in like a crab in a bucket to the friend group that you've always had, or you'll break through. In that moment when you break through, if you decide to do that, which sounds like what you and your wife are looking to do, you'll move into this season that is like the dark night of the soul, where you haven't necessarily found your tribe, but you're no longer connected to your old tribe. And it can feel very lonely. It's easy to feel kind of disconnected and socially in a weird flux. That will change in time, but things you would have to do in order for that to change is put yourself out there, network, go look for and purposely find groups of people who are more aligned with what you are doing. Get involved with hobbies that people that you want to be aligned with do. And over time, you'll find a new friend group and you'll find people that are more aligned. Also with social media, it's probably easier than ever to find communities and groups of people who share your values and your vision. And you may do this many times in your lifetime. It's not uncommon to kind of grow through multiple communities of people if you are committed to the path of growth and contribution. But just recognize it's part of the cost of continuing to grow. It's part of the cost of seeking higher and higher levels of success. If your friend group isn't growing with you, eventually you will outgrow them. And it's not a judgment. I wouldn't take an arrogant attitude. It just means that they have different priorities and values than you do. Bid them farewell, love them from afar, continue. By the way, fair warning, this also happens in marriages, where people within their marriage, one is growing and one is not, and inevitably it'll tear them apart, or both are growing, but they're growing in different directions. In any case, if you're prioritizing growth over everything else, you will likely change friends groups many times over a lifetime. Great question. Hope that helps.
Someone asked, have you ever come across someone who you couldn't make peace with?
If I ever came across somebody I wasn't able to make peace with. It's a great question. I appreciate it. If you're asking if I'm not able to make peace, no, because that's within my control. If you're asking me, have you ever ran into somebody else that you haven't been able to get aligned with or make peace with? Yes, that's normal. You can't control other people, only how you respond and how you show up. So surrender the illusion of control, do your part in that, right? Which is releasing unforgiveness, resentment, bitterness, owning your part, taking radical accountability for the part, or responsibility for the part that you played. But beyond them, it's up to them to decide what they want to do with it, and it's not something you can force on them. And there is such a thing as trying too hard, where you come over the top and you'll actually make the situation worse. So show up in love, show up in forgiveness, and allow them to be them and accept that. And that may mean that you guys are no longer friends, or you no longer have the same relationship. And frankly, that's totally okay. You're both on your own journey. Simply surrender the illusion that you can control somebody else or force someone to grow or to let go of something. That's their work, not yours. Control yourself and focus on the part that you can control.
Why do men cheat and then want to come back?
An age-old question, I'm sure. Well, I can't speak for the whole male population, but I can speak for my own experience working with clients and different people in my own life. I think there is a difference for men between the novelty of a variety of sex and what they get from that, and a partnership or love, meaning they're meeting two different sets of needs that sometimes are diabolically opposed to one another. And so it shows up in stepping outside of their marriage or outside of the relationship if they don't have a agreed upon ethical non-monogamous relationship. It will show up in I'm trying to get a particular need met, and usually an impulse or in some cases, instinctual need to experience novelty in sex, but it doesn't negate the fact that I love this person. So it may be slightly different for women, and I certainly don't want to speak for women here, so I'll be careful. But I will say it is not hard for me to get my head around the idea that a man could absolutely go have sex with a random woman and it have zero bearing on the fact that they love this other person. Meaning, it's not an indictment per se on the other person or a lack of love for the other person. It's a desire to either get a need met or for validation or for novelty. There's a number of impulses that drive male human behavior and sexual behavior in response, but they can coexist for sure, where it's, hey, I love this person, I love the family we've built, I love the life that we have, but I have this need for sexual novelty. Now, within the bounds of a moral value world, I can't speak to that. That's between you and your partner as to what is acceptable and what isn't. I will say ethical non-monogamy, both men and women, is becoming increasingly more prevalent in our society, and there is a big difference between partnership and sexual experimentation. So there's that. Now, coming back to groveling and coming back one is an impulsive need, right? The need in the moment. But as soon as that, literally there is a release and that is done, sometimes the man clears his head and goes, well, this is the woman I want, this is who I want to be with, or they're meeting a set of needs that they don't want to give up. And so obviously this can be incredibly painful. And I've seen it happen the other way, though I would say there are exceptions, but women are more likely to feel emotionally connected when they cheat. Men can absolutely have sex with somebody and have zero emotional connection to it, and just use it as an experience. And so men and women are different in many ways, but that is one of them. Hopefully that helps. That's a spicy question for sure.
Can a mama's boy grow into a man when they're already over 40?
Can a mama's boy turn into a man if they're over the age of 40? I refuse to believe that humans can't change. And to the day you die, I believe it is possible for you to change, to see the world a certain way, or to change the way you see the world. I will say, the older we get, it does seem more challenging because those behaviors, patterns of belief become more solidified, but that doesn't mean they can't change. They would just need some kind of catalyst or trigger to do so. And so yes, I would say they absolutely can, but you have your hands full. And I'll also say this, don't date or at least marry someone believing that they're going to change. Marry the person or date the person in front of you and love and accept them for who they are. If you cannot, I would highly suggest not being in a relationship with them. One of the big mistakes we make in commitments to people is loving somebody they're not and loving who we hope that they could be, not who they actually are. If you are on the other side of that, where you feel like somebody loves you for somebody you're really not, that sucks. And if you're the person loving somebody, believing they're going to be something different, also very painful. So go into the relationship eyes wide open, understand who they are. If you can accept them for who they are, great. If you can't, then I'd reconcile that before you get into a long-term committed relationship with them.
What are your thoughts on a man that says he doesn't have any visions for the future?
Borrowing from the minor prophets of the Old Testament, my people perish for their lack of vision. I'm not a big fan, but that there's also context there. If it's somebody who has done the work, is super aware, and is very present, and is co-creating in the world, and that's what they mean, great. If this is somebody that has zero ambition, doesn't give a shit about anything, and is super apathetic to the world, that to me is a disease. And so unless you want to contract that disease or you feel like you're the doctor that's going to fix it, I probably would steer clear, especially if this is the male in the relationship that is meant to lead the family.